came to Canada, you did that series in Massey, and that series was actually called Truth Matters back then. And only 2 or 3 little small lectures were about the Masonic and occult orders, and you received a lot of opposition about those. And now, shortly thereafter, a few years later, you expanded them and decided that there was more evidence that was needed to silence the critics. So we now have total onslaught. How did you get that additional information?
Well, you see, the problem is with people that grow up in the truth, they are so protected from the world. They think that these things are unnecessary. Why don't we just preach Jesus? Why do we have to preach about things like this? They don't understand. They're sitting beautifully, comfortably in the church, enjoying all the privileges, while people like I was out there in the world, destitute, robbed of truth. I mean, one of my colleagues was a Seventh-day Adventist. He sat next to me in an office not far from me, 19 years, and never opened his mouth. When I became an Adventist, I thought I was going to clobber him. 19 years, and he doesn't tell me. And this is how I felt. So this was not information for them. They were already comfortably sitting there. This was for the outside world.
There may be other people who feel like you did.
Exactly, and
someday.
This is where I came from. And people say, how can you speak against Catholicism in this way? If John Knox hadn't gotten up and preached Daniel chapter 7 to the Scots, they would all be Catholic today. But the whole nation became Protestant on the strength of one sermon.
But I think that's a very important point. You know, after hearing your whole life story, I think many people are wondering, how could so many things happen within one lifetime to one person, and all of them fascinating and interesting? And, you know, it feels like you'd have to live 1,000 years to experience all those things that you have experienced. But I think that it's because you do something for God. You weren't like that man who just did your job and sat in an office and not say anything and pay off your debt and be very quiet. But despite your debt, despite all the hindrances, you wanted to work for God. And people who are going to work for God are going to experience something exciting in their life. There's going to be opposition, and then they're going to be tested.
What do you always say about boring?
Well, sometimes I think it would be nice to have some peace and quiet for a change. But I realize the time is short, and if we don't do it, who's going to do this work? And there are very few evangelists in the world, if you think of it. There are just a handful of people that are still preaching this message.